Okay, today we are going to be making the pop-up corrupted shrine, and it's a building. It's got this interior space. You can open it up. Your troops can hide out in there, and of course, it's pop-up, so the whole thing folds flat and pops back up. It's got a lot of cool little windows and such. So a lot of cutting and some kind of complicated folds, but not too bad. Anyway, let's get started. What you're going to need for this one is a copy of your Popup Corrupted Shrine PDF, all printed out, double-sided. If you find you're having trouble getting the fronts and backs to align, it's helped me to print them out on one side and then manually flip it and print the other side. So you're also going to need an X-Acto knife, maybe some extra blades in case your blades break, a ruler, preferably metal so you can cut along the edge, and some scissors are always nice to have, a tool for scoring. I like to use a dried out ballpoint pen that's had the ink cartridge removed so it doesn't write, but it's able to create a line where the paper will fold. And today I'll be using double-sided tape. You can use glue, either one's fine. And you're going to need some backing material. What I've got today is 2 pieces of illustration board, old illustration board, but you can use mat board or cardboard or foam core, anything you want really. I like the heavier boards like an illustration board or a mat board because they've got some weight to it. So let's put the base together first. And to do that, we're going to need to cut out the base pieces. They're labeled to show which piece goes where. If you want, you can score along the center line. And in this case, the center line is going from edge to edge. Corner to corner, not edge to edge. And what that means is that that's where it's going to fold, I guess. Yeah, it's pretty simple. So let's go ahead and cut out the base. We don't need to cut it out super precise at this point because we're going to be trimming off these edges with the paper cutter or X-Acto knife or whatever when we're trimming down our base material. So for this part, we really only need to trim a line to trim off all the white areas where there's going to be overlapping on the interior of the base. So there we go. So this Corrupted Shrine is a remake, sort of retexturing, redesign of an earlier pop-up known as the Gazebo. And the Gazebo was when our first pop-up Kickstarter, so this one's gone through a couple of iterations and I really like the way this turned out. So let's put this base together. And first we're gonna tape the 2 big pieces together. And the nice part about this is that the ground textures, a lot of textures, should be able to see where everything lines up. And I had a lot of fun drawing all these intricate lines and stuff, and so I hope you guys get to have fun with this as well. Let's see, so you line up those textures as best you can. That's the top 2 pieces. What I like to do is glue the bottom two pieces together first. And it looks like this piece is maybe a little uneven. We'll trim that once we glue it together and see how it goes. It's just because of the way I cut it out, but take a look at it. Okay, so these two pieces, if the textures are matched up, looks like I cut that one, so that's a little bit more material there. Trim that off so we get a nice straight line. If we had left it, it wouldn't have affected the pop-up, but it might have made it look a little less cool to me, so I trimmed it. This into place. Watch those ground textures, make sure they line up before you push your tape or glue down. And there you go. Boom. So that's our ground texture. We're going to now attach that to the base. First we're going to fold it on that center line, remember where we scored, and we're going to tape all the way around these edges. So that's what'll hold this on to the mat board here. So let's do that. And I'll put the tape on both sides before we attach the backing material. The first one was named the gazebo, in part reference to an old D&D joke where maybe it's a story. I'm not sure what the origins of the story are, but basically, you know, the party emerges from the dungeon to find a gazebo, and the player, perhaps a young player, doesn't know what a gazebo is in real life, and thinks it sounds like a D&D monster and attacks the gazebo. You know, the gazebo. So I don't know, you might have, if you play Munchkin, you know, the original Munchkin set had a gazebo in there. It's a reference to that. Which, I don't know, me and my kids still joke about it every time we see a gazebo. Like, attack the gazebo! Alright, so what I like to do is use one of the pieces of backing material to make sure that I'm giving myself a little bit of space in between the two. Oh, that was bad. That was the opposite of what I was trying to do. So, yeah. Okay. Nope. Still crap. I'm doing it wrong. That's why. The base goes on this side. The backing material goes on this side, and that way you have a little bit of space there. Okay? you want to make sure that there's space in between the two boards, because if there's not, what you end up with is a situation where the boards kind of have tension when you try to close or when you try to open the pop-up, and that it's not good. Makes it so that it doesn't quite lay flat. And I mean, if you're just using it as a pop-up, that's fine, you know. But if you're using it as a terrain piece, you want that piece to lay flat and have the stability to not like wiggle around when you're moving your miniatures around and stuff. So I like to make sure there's that room in between, that space in between, somewhere between, you know, a 1/4 inch and even a 1/16 of an inch. Yeah, we'll be fine. So there we go. Let's go ahead and trim that, and I like to use my paper cutter. You could use an X-Acto knife or scissors, but this is gonna be faster for the purposes of this demonstration to do it this way. So just trim off those edges so that your basing material is the same size as that printed hexagon that you assembled. And that's our base. So once the base is put together, it's time to start putting together the rest, cutting out those pieces. And but before we do any cutting on that part, once again, we're going to score all the parts. So we're drawing a line with our empty pen using a ruler between each blue arrow and its corresponding blue arrow on the other side. And when we do that, we're creating a place in the paper where it's going to bend first. It's going to bend there before it bends anywhere else, and that's going to keep our pop-up nice and crisp. It's going to make sure that those folds are happening where they're supposed to happen and not somewhere else. And if they happen somewhere else, then it's I don't know, it's not as cool. So we're gonna go ahead and score all of these before I forget, because once I start cutting, I tend to forget all about the scoring. That's a problem. And there's 4 pages, mostly because these parts are fairly large. There's not that many big parts to this one, but there are some. There's quite a few small parts that make it look really cool when they go all the way around the outside. So let's start with part number 1. Is what I like to do. Find part number 1. We're gonna cut it out, and we're gonna attach it. So now these interior spaces are going to be harder to cut after you've cut out the outside. So I recommend cutting out your interior spaces first, and then cutting out the outside spaces. And I would even go so far as to recommend go ahead and cut out all the interior spaces. Well, no, then you'd lose your numbers. Let's just cut out this one, and I mean, if you have a copy of this pulled up on your computer, you'll know which part is which. You could cut out all the interior spaces first, but since the numbers are on the interior spaces, we're going to leave it for now and make sure that we can see where each of these parts is going to be glued. So this is piece piece number 1 has a spot that says 1 to B, 1 to B. That's what we're gluing. 1 to the base. So we find that spot on the base. 1 to B. We match up the ground textures and we glue it down. Next we're going to do part number 2. Same process. Cut out the interior first. Then cut out the exterior. Fold it like so and attach it to spot 2 to B. To be or not to be? It's to be. That's what I just told you. Okay. Okay, so that's parts 1 and 2. Now we're going to do part 3. Now part 3's job is to be an internal support. So let's see if that is all labeled properly. Here we go. 3 to B, and put some adhesive on there. And then attach that to its spot, and the textures should match up with the ground so you can see that it's in the right spot there. Okay, next we're going to do part number 4, and it looks like we get to search for that one. Okay. It's the corresponding parts to part number 3. Okay, and there's 4 to B. And that goes right here. Again, we match up the ground textures as best we can and glue that on. Okay. So that's parts 3 and 4. Now we move on to part 5. Parts 5 and 6 are the walls. Some of the walls. There's 6 walls total, and they kind of use 2 different ways to pop up. So 5 and 6 represent 4 of the different sides of this hexagon that we're making. And part 5 and 6 use what I call a corner fold, where you just have a corner that goes along your center line, and that pops up because of the I don't know, physics. It pops up because of the physics. Okay? You guys know all about that stuff. Nerds. Alright. So now we're gluing 5 to B2 and 5 to be 1. Those are the spots. Basically, we're just gluing part 5 to the base. I'm going to use the word glue instead of tape a lot. It's a problem that I have. I'm trying to deal with it, you know, trying to get the right combination of stuff. Alright, so 5 to be 2 and 5 to be 1, and those just go right in here. They go right there. Base textures will line up a little bit for the most part. And there you'll go. Okay. Next we do part number 6. And that's pretty much exactly like part number 5, except that it is got a 6 on it instead. Now you'll notice these little drawings of little statues in their niches, and I imagined that this shrine was sort of to like the greats, the patrons, sort of heroes of the past. So on part number 6, you got this old guy with a beard, maybe he's a wizard, and this guy with the glasses and the wrench, he's some sort of like artificer, mech engineer or something. So that was my thought when I was making it anyway, that they would be great heroes of the past. Doesn't have to be a religious shrine, you know. I mean, it could be like a secular shrine. So let's attach part 6. To the base, right here. Again, we're going to line up those textures and attach it right there. So it's looking good. Let's do part number 7. Part number 7 is a big one because it goes across the top. Oh, again, cut out the interior spaces first. Almost forgot. You know, if you don't, it's not a huge deal. You can always go back and cut it out later. It's just harder. That's all. Just trying to save you some work. Okay, and we cut the other side here. So let's make that happen. Okay, part number 7. Now, part number 7 is going to be attached. So we've got our tape, and we're gonna get some adhesive here and put some on part 3 and some on part 4, and then we're going to attach parts 3 and parts 4. Part 7, it might help to bend this part first and bend this part. Here we go. Okay, so let's see if that folds flat. Looks as if it does. So that's good. Next, we're going to be attaching part 8. Now, part 8 is a lot like part 7, just on the other side. So let's do it. One material that you need that I keep forgetting to mention in every video that I've ever made is the self-healing mat board. Extremely useful to have. I mean, you can cut this on a cardboard, you can cut it on, just anything you have extra, you put it underneath, but if you get some self-healing mat board, it's pretty great stuff for not damaging your table, and you don't want to damage your table. Okay? Don't do it. If you have your own table and you're like, whatever, you can't tell me what to do, Mike. You're not my mom. Well, that is generally true. But just don't damage your table. It's not that hard to find some cardboard. Go down to your local furniture store. They got a ton of cardboard there. They're not even using it. When I was a kid, we would drive down to the town of... I grew up in Virginia, but we would drive across the border down to Roanoke Rapids for church every week. And there was this furniture store. We'd drive past the back of it, and if they had any big refrigerator boxes, we would stop and we'd get them. And then my dad would build us these awesome box forts out of them in our basement. It was a finished basement. It was nice, but the box forts were not upstairs. They weren't they weren't upstairs material. Anyway, there'd be these awesome box forts, and they'd have multiple levels, so you'd be able to go up on multiple levels of these box forts. Okay, so that is coming together well. Opens, it folds flat. So our next part we're working on is the next part numerically, which is parts 9 through 14. And those can go on in any order. We're just going to cut all those out and put them all on. Okay? Let's do it. Actually, first I'm going to attach 1 and 2 to 7. Those are parts I forgot about earlier. When you glue in a part, it's usually best to glue in all of the other parts that connect to it, and these parts clearly connect. Now on these parts, the texture isn't going to match up perfectly, and that's because it's a slightly different texture. I thought it would be cool to have some little additional filigree on there, so just line it up vertically and glue it to the spot where it says to glue it, and you'll be fine. Alright, so let's, with these ones, we know it's 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's just go ahead and cut out the interior spaces first so that that's out of the way. We don't want to forget to cut out those interior spaces. Sometimes I like to cut all the horizontal lines first, or all the vertical lines first, and then all the horizontal ones. Somehow I find that very satisfying sometimes. tend to like to mix it up in terms of my work processes too. Like I don't always like to do everything in the same order. I always thought that like as an artist I would have like this way that I did things every time and that would really work, but it's just I like variety, I guess. Okay, so this is number 9. If you forget, because you cut out all the middle spaces like I did, you can look on the back and it'll say like 9 to B on there, and you're like, oh, there's no way this would say 9 to B if it was part number 10. That wouldn't make any sense. Anyway, back to the box forts. The box forts that my dad would make were just great, you know. I remember one had four stories. It was a 4-story box fort, and part of it was a like a rocket ship, and there was I mean, I feel like the rocket ship was the main feature, I guess, other than the 4-story apartment complex next to it that was all built out of boxes. And at bedtime, it made it real hard because we would just go in there, you know. It was not intended to accommodate adults getting kids out, which is what I found when I made box forts for my own children. Alright, so here is part number 10. And so basically all of these parts they're going to be pretty similar. Like exactly the same in terms of what you're doing with them. So don't get try not to get bored. Okay, this is part number 10. Part number 11 is next. Anyway, maybe the point of the story is that, to some extent, my love of paper buildings may have come from the box forts, you know? Because I would always I'd be like, this box fort needs a window, and I'd go get like a steak knife from the kitchen. No wonder we just probably had really dull steak knives, which was fine because I honestly don't ever remember eating steak growing up. Like I remember eating beef. It's like we never had like hamburgers or like cheese and steak subs. We had those at home all the time. I just don't ever remember like, here's a steak, son, you know? But anyway, all that we'd get out the steak knives and we'd cut, you know, windows, and we'd build little like pieces of furniture for the box fort interior, and been a blast. So that's what I think of every time I see a furniture store, is that, oh hey, they probably have a bunch of cardboard boxes. I mean, the refrigerator boxes were the best because they were built with like 4 layers of cardboard. So, I mean, if we could find a couple of refrigerator boxes during the process of building the box fort, then we knew that we'd be able to have that like second 2-story box fort. Way better than a 1-story box fort. So yeah, the refrigerator boxes, or like the, you know, like a good washer or dryer box. Those things could like carry some weight. And my dad would wire the whole thing together with coat hangers, like the steel coat hangers. Not steel. They're probably I don't know what they are. Cheap metal is what they are. I've tried making art out of them and they just break. But the point is, he would use them to make the box forts, and so that's probably where most of the injuries came from in the box forts. Not from falling off the 4th story of a box fort, but from accidentally brushing against one of the coat hanger wires that were used to wire the whole thing together. Or, you know, all the staples. I mean, there were staples in those things. Alright, so that is part number 14. I glued it in before 13, which I'm going to tape, not glue, next. I know I'm doing these demonstrations for you guys, but I am so stoked to have like 2 sets of these things put together and just be able to do all kinds of crazy scenarios for my next D&D campaign. I'm planning it, you know, thinking about it. I'm thinking about putting together like a cool module that like involves a bunch of the Stonehaven minis and like a bunch of the pop-ups. Mostly because I already have them, so I wouldn't have to buy anything new. Okay, so then we got parts 15 and 16. These are the roof flaps, and what they do is they go on the roof and they make it so that you can have minis standing on the roof and stuff. So let's cut those out, part 15 and part 16. And they also make it so you can open it up and put guys inside. Move around your troops, which for me is sort of it's a big deal, you know? Like, if there's a building, if you took the trouble to put a building in a game, I want to see the inside of it. There's nothing that bugs me more. That's not true. There are a lot of things that bug me in games. But like video games, when you're like wandering around and like you come into a town and there's like 50 buildings and you can go into 3 of them. You're like, ah. I don't know. I loved that in Skyrim you could go into like every building, right? Every single one. And I felt like that is how every game should be ever. Even if the insides are all the same, kinda, you know? That's sort of what it was like in Skyrim for most of them. But like, it's set a standard, you know. Set a standard. Alright, so for these ones, I'm going to cut a piece of double-sided tape in half. These adhesive spots are a little narrower of necessity. So, 1/4 inch strip of adhesive should do it. So now I'm attaching part 15 to 7. Again, you match up those textures as best you can and attach that into place. And then part 16 to 7, you do the same thing. 16 to 8, sorry. 7 and 8 are now one part, but they were once two. The two have become one. And again, you match up those textures and secure that into place. Okay, and I believe, yeah, you want the part with the round part to go underneath when you're folding it. Fold it for the first time, make sure everything works. And that's it, folks. The pop-up gazebo, ready, sorry, not pop-up gazebo, corrupted shrine, retexture of the gazebo. And it's all done. It looks great. You should be able to find these on stonehavenmini.com. Thanks.